haven't made any theory videos since the end of Life is Strange, and well, that's purely because I'm really excited or stirred up enough by a game to the point where I actively want to and enjoy talking about it in depth and at length. Since Oxenfree isn't an episodic format like Life is Strange is, however, I will make probably one lengthy video split into two parts. The first part will discuss my favorite elements of the game, somewhat like a review, and the second part will discuss some theories and elements of the game in detail. There shouldn't be any major spoilers in the first part, but I will discuss some parts of the storyline, hopefully without ruining the whole plot. There will definitely be spoilers in the second part. If you prefer to not risk hearing any spoilers at all, then here's your chance to duck out. I also have a Steam link in the description box because I really adore this game, and while I do have a playthrough on this channel, I recommend you buy it yourself and play it yourself first. When the game started, I entirely forgot that there would be scary supernatural elements to the story. To me, that's a real credit to how truly well executed the story was. You start off innocently enough, playing as Alex, a teenage girl who's on a ferry at sunset with her lifelong best friend Ren, and her brand new stepbrother Jonas, who she's meeting for the first time. Apparently we're in for a fairly typical teenage night out. Ren's pulled some strings with the ferry driver and has snuck them out to meet with friends on their local island, which just so happens to also be entirely empty and closed at night. The island, as Ren tells it, is a tourist trap open to the public during the day. Edward's Island is a place that he and his friends have frequented in the past, and yet it's only had one resident since its past days of being a US Army base. The supernatural elements slowly seep into focus. At first, playing with the weird radio waves that let us hear odd sounds and whispers is intriguing and maybe a little ominous, but as the game continues, the eerie voices turn to full-blown possessions, mind games, and life-altering situations as Alex and her friends scramble to retain control, find answers, and survive the night. Honestly though, I could have spent a lot longer sitting on the beach soaking in all those characters. The characters were incredibly well written and well rounded, and I became entirely invested in them very early into the game. My low tolerance for anything even remotely horror related was thrown out the window for the sake of following along the stories of these characters, since playing more meant that I could discover more aspects of their personalities, their personal stories, and their pasts. And honestly, the building intrigue from the supernatural elements of the story had me hooked to the mysterious events unfolding as well. Though what really hit the spot for me was that for the most part, your choices really felt like they stuck and mattered for longer than a few sentences. I have to credit this to the extensive branching dialogue. I also enjoyed that the game doesn't sit around and wait for you. The conversation can and will carry on without you, and the characters spoke at a much faster pace than I'm used to seeing. A little reminiscent of the Gilmore Girls' fast-paced dialogue that I was a really big fan of. It was an unexpected and welcomed surprise that really added to the believability of the characters themselves. As Alex, we get to direct the flow of the conversation through dialogue options, each speech bubble being a different color, which I initially assumed was meant to represent good, bad, or neutral choices. As I found out, this ended up not being as straightforward as I thought. In a sense, there were no real right or wrong answers to the situations at hand, which added to the great level of reality and natural flow. Of course, the first thing that I noticed was that the game was really beautiful. I really felt that the simplistic design and game mechanics were perfectly fitted and complementary rather than a downfall of the game. The atmosphere really added to the creepy vibe at the right moments, and in other moments I was taken aback by how much I enjoyed looking at everything. The soundtrack, I felt, really added to that also. The incorporation of the radio also meshed perfectly, using a staticky radio as a medium for contacting the supernatural world, getting hidden messages and codes, and even solving some situations, added to the genuinely scary moments. Mixing that in with time looping, temporal tears, alternate realities, and possessions made it all a really unique experience that somehow managed to not confuse, complicate, or pull away from what I felt was the main focus of the game, the characters. Okay, so from here on out there will be legitimate spoilers. I can't theorize without them, so with the last warning out of the way, we can discuss things more in depth. The ending certainly threw me for a loop. I mean, I had a sneaking suspicion that we might be repeating time, stuck in a loop, or something of that nature, but I really thought we would know more for certain before that point to help us understand why. Since so much is either completely unanswered or not directly answered, let's take a moment to compile some of the most important things we can deduce from a playthrough and what we can't and need to know. The USS Kanaloa crew were initially thought to be ghosts, but are not technically ghosts. According to them, they aren't ghosts at all, and how rude of you to talk to them like that as they mess around with your head, but they no longer have their buddies and exist in a place in between timelines, kind of like a limbo. How do we know this? When Alex ventures to the side towards the end of the game, they have no physical buddies of their own, at least not that we see. But before that, they explain that the only way for them to have more time is for them to essentially soak into the bodies of Alex and her friends over an extended period of time, which would pull Alex and her friend's soul out and dump them into the limbo in-between place while the ghosts walk around in their bodies out in the real world where they can live life again. The USS Kanaloa crew are trying to convey a message throughout the game to Alex about how they died. They hint throughout the game that they were sunk on purpose, and Maggie Adler confirms this through a series of letters. I made a rough timeline of events so you have something physical to look at just for reference. I will just stick to calling them ghosts. The ghosts imply that time flows endlessly in circles, eternal recurrence and whatnot.
What is it? How can you come back from something like this?
They're not an eternal recurrence. The waves. It's the waves, we think. And we will use those waves to absorb into your friends as sunlight blooms into flowers. And we will grow. And we will engulf.
We also see other Alexes reflected in mirrored surfaces throughout the game, giving her messages about the right choices to make, and at the end of the game we ourselves do the same to Alexes in the past. This to me implies that there are multiple reoccurring timelines parallel to each other, each endlessly repeating. The ghosts confirm this with how they talk about Alex and Maggie. But wait, if each timeline is the same, then what about Michael, who we can bring back through choices? Well, here's my take on that. There are certain things in every timeline, let's call it the bigger true timeline, that will always occur. But I think there are small variances that can happen in each that are not big enough to change the larger fated events on their own, and thus eventually will lead to the same larger fate, regardless. Alex seems to be the only one really aware of the smaller time loops. She has lots of deja vu, she's the only one getting messages from reflections, she's the only one of them that can change the present by changing her choices in the past, as far as we can tell anyway, and Michael even mentions in the past that she has reoccurring dreams of him dying, which also seems to be some sort of deja vu.
Is this because you keep having those dreams? Because I had a crazy dream about...
Melanie Pfizer?
Oh, come on!
No. You drowned in Horn Lake back at home.
Yeah, and last week I died in the fire, right? You keep having these nightmares because you eat Mom's cookies like right before bed.
One reason could be that it's because she's the one in control of these smaller timelines inside the bigger true timelines. For one, the ghosts insist that she's in charge. They insist that the small time loops are her doing and not theirs, and she's the only one who knows how to fix them when they become, let's say, glitched through use of the magnetophones.
It's not us doing it, dear. We weren't lying. The time loops, as you've taken to calling them, which we do find so adorable, are of your own making.
Yeah, sure. Just like you infesting us like lice isn't your fault either.
That we have and will own up to, but the other stuff, that we're afraid is on you.
Alex has been here before. We get hints of this from the ghosts themselves, we get hints from anomalies, and lastly we see different versions of Alex who offer her advice and offer our own advice to other Alexes ourselves at the end, which sort of seems like in every timeline Alex ends up on the island. The core of the group always remains the same: Alex, Ren, Nona, Clarissa, and Jonas. Well, okay, we only know this for sure about Alex, Ren, and Jonas, but I assume it sort of implies all of them. I say this because of the end scene when they're headed off the island and the final end loop. For example, when I brought Michael back, it almost made no sense that Jonas was still there. A new story was created for Jonas just so he could still be part of the group that went to the island. I mean, for one, he didn't live near Alex and her friends to begin with. He only moved there because his dad moved in with Alex's mother, and they only met and married because Alex's parents divorced, and Alex's parents only divorced because of Michael's death, and so on. If Michael never died, then there really is no reason for Jonas to be there. It would take a really large set of coincidences for Jonas to randomly move to Alex's town, somehow meet Ren anyway, and still end up coming to the island that night. Then there's a loop at the end where Jonas and Ren are mentioned again.
Sorry, I gotta run or I'll miss the ferry. Ren's dragging me out to Edwards Island for that yearly beach party thing, and I have to pick up what's-his-name Jonas, too. I hope he's not weird or mean or something. Whatever, I'm sure it'll be fun. It's something to do, right?
There are people who have stayed on the island, presumably overnight, who seem to have died or disappeared. There's abandoned tents, leftover items in the cave, and even some anomalies and radio messages that hint at this. We know some of the names of the crew members of the USS Kanaloa: Francis Salter, Calvin Gilbert, and Henry Griffin. Maggie notes that the crew's minds are stuck in a childlike state, hence the mind games and tests and so on. The USS Kanaloa was carrying a developmental nuclear reactor and was sent out weeks before it was sunk. Few knew of its existence, and communications were at some point cut between the army base and the sub. What don't we know? Well, we don't know what the significance is of the USS Walter's weapon tech being at Francis Salter's wedding, but this struck Maggie as odd enough to mention in her letters. We don't really know why the Kanaloa was destroyed. We know how, but not why. Also, there were these anomalies that suggest that it could have all been planned, or that experiments could have been planned for time travel, perhaps. Maybe they could have even known about what could have happened to the crew by doing this.
Charlie 6.
Every individual, it is maintained, is enveloped in a radium invisible to the carnal eye and only perceived by the soul accustomed to it.
Anna, Maggie's friend and co-worker, was apparently pulled into the temporal tear and killed while helping Maggie with the goal of pulling out the USS Kanaloa crew. What we don't know for certain is if she is in the same place that the crew is in. If she is she one of the voices we speak to? Does she remember who she is? And are these Morse code messages signs of a deteriorating mind? Also, the ghosts mention this at the end when they talk to Alex.
Maggie will have this friend, and you sort of remind us of her.
Strange
Girl. Odd-tempered.
Which almost makes it sound like Anna will continue to be Maggie's friend throughout all the lifetimes or lines, but aren't the ghosts outside of the timeline? I can't even contemplate how that works or what that means without extreme confusion. The game ends in what we consider to be a loop backwards. Or is it? I have two theories, but since I feel that the game is left with so many mysteries unsolved, or rather they aren't directly answered, I'm not really willing to set any of them in stone. I also feel that maybe the real meaning of the loop changes depending on the choices made in the end, even though what we see of the ending seems to remain the same no matter what we choose. The first theory is that Alex is and has been repeating this one stage of her life because her first original choice was to sacrifice herself so that her friends could safely get off the island. This could explain why she seems to be trying to feed information to her past self to make the right choice that could fix things. Perhaps Alex is using her abilities to retain memories from all these other timelines, fix glitches, send messages into the past to herself, and so on, to find a way to break out of the larger timeline, to change fate by collectively making changes in several timelines. Perhaps if they all make the same choices, there is a way for them to break through. The problem with this theory is that she remembers who she is at all. Not only that, but she's also different from the ghosts. She's retained her humanity, and her mind is not deteriorating like the rest of them. If she was stuck there on the island on the same side as the ghosts, like they tell her she will be, then why is she not outside the influence of time loops? My second and final theory is that the loop at the end is not a loop backwards, but a loop forwards or into another timeline. Since the bigger events seem to occur no matter what smaller changes are made to the timeline, Alex and her friends will always be back on that island. This doesn't mean she's stuck there. The Alex we played through still got out, still went on to live a full life. But as the universe starts over, so too will all the other fated events. Maybe Alex and her friends were always meant to go to the island, but not necessarily be stuck there. Maybe what happens to them depends on the choices they make, and so to us, as the players, it looks as if Alex never got out. But we've merely skipped forward to meet Alex at another timeline, back on the island again. But those are just my theories again, since so little can be known for certain. I had a hard time pointing out one solid conclusion that answers everything. I will also have videos up of the collectibles and any other secrets or alternative conversations I can find during my own playthrough, so if you need any extra resources for helping you with your own theories, I will link the playlist below. If you enjoyed this theory/review, please like and subscribe, and comment of course to let me know of your own thoughts and own theories.
Like this here. When I was younger, I could remember anything, whether it happened or not. But soon, I shall be so I cannot remember any but the things that never happened.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, everyone.
Wait, what?
Cheese!